Hi, it's another day and another story to tell. Welcome to In Cold Blood and Cold Brew. Hello true crime fans. If this is your first time joining my channel, go ahead and like, subscribe, do all the things. I post a new video every single Wednesday, so if you're interested in true crime stories and stuff like that, then go ahead and subscribe. Today I've got a case that I first heard about when I was like 12 years old because of a Lifetime movie based on the case, and it's called The Disappearance of Natalee Holloway, and the movie is actually based on the book that Natalee's mother Beth wrote about everything that happened. And the book is called Loving Natalee, if you're interested and you want to grab a copy of it. So before I start, I want to make a disclaimer. Any sources, videos, links, any material that I used in order to compile for this case, I will have in the description. And then also, if you have any questions or if you have any other information that you want to tell me about the case, go ahead and put that in the comments down below. I would love to read anything that you guys have, any theories that you have about the case. As far as telling stories, I have never ever gone into this with the intention of hurting the victims or the victims' families. This is purely just to tell stories, and I believe that bringing more awareness to any case can either find justice for the victims or tell a story and a lesson for people who could possibly find themselves in these kind of situations. Especially with this case, I mean, Natalee could have been any of us, and although this story is over 15 years old now, it could still happen to any one of us. So without further ado, let's go ahead and tell the story. So everything starts in 2005. I remember 2005 as like High School Musical, the start of YouTube. And on May 24th, she was graduating from Mountain Brook High School, and she graduated with honors, and she had a full ride pre-med scholarship to the University of Alabama. She was, by all accounts, responsible, hardworking. She obviously had a bright future ahead of her somewhere in the medical field, and she was very involved in school. She was a part of the National Honor Society. She was on the dance team. She was a part of the Natural Helpers peer counseling group, and all of this had led up to this amazing moment where she was going to graduate, and after graduation she was going to go on this let loose unofficial graduation trip to Aruba with 124 of her classmates. And I think that's why when only 6 days later she vanishes, it becomes a surprise to everyone. So Natalee lived in Mountain Brook, which is in Jefferson County in Alabama, and it's a pretty affluent area. She lived with her mother Beth, who you'll hear a lot about, and her stepfather George, who goes by Jug Twitty. Although worried, her parents allowed her to go on this trip. It was a 5-day unofficial graduation trip to Aruba with 124 of her classmates. They had 7 chaperones from the school, and this was gonna be a super fun let loose vacation. Being from an affluent area, it wasn't difficult for Natalee and her friends to afford a all-inclusive hotel stay at the Holiday Inn in Aruba. So after preparations, graduation, and anticipation for this trip, the students and chaperones finally arrive at the Holiday Inn on May 26, 2005. So our timeline has started from May 24th, which was her graduation. Now we're on May 26th, which was the day they arrived in Aruba, and we're in the Holiday Inn. What ensues after this is just normal, I'm 18, I can drink legally on this foreign island nonsense. So they're getting drunk, they're having parties, they're staying up late, they're not going to sleep at all, going to the casinos, drinking, like just having pure fun. Especially let loose fun. You just graduated and you're about to go into college and kind of like the rest of your life. And so this was the time for them to just let loose and have fun and be free. According to the police commissioner, I pronounce it as Gerald Dompig, we'll hear a lot more about him later. He says that the Mountain Brook students engaged in wild partying, a lot of drinking, lots of room switching every night, and he was the head of the investigation from the mid-2005 when this case happened to 2006. And apparently the Holiday Inn told them they were not welcome next year. So, and one of those nights, it was exactly the same. It was actually the last night, and they went out to a casino in the Holiday Inn. Natalee and her friends are just hanging out, and they're at the tables, and while they're at the tables, a man catches her eye. He's a Dutchman who is accompanied by 2 local Aruban brothers. This is when she meets the first 3 suspects, Joran van der Sloot and Satish and Deepak Kalpoe. Natalee and her friends invite Joran to go out to the Hip and Happen in Carlos and Charlie's in Oranjestad, Aruba. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. They eat, they drink, they party, and they do this until the bar closes. So the timelines are a bit split. They have multiple times for when the bar actually closes, and now I can't verify because the place that was Carlos and Charlie's turned into a Senor Frogs, but we'll say 1:30 to 2 o'clock because that's what most of the sources say. Now, it's May 29th. But as the morning comes around, it turns into May 30th. And Natalee is last seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's with Joran and the Kalpoe brothers in a gray Honda owned by Deepak. And after that, she's never seen again. So like I said, the night that they went to the casino, that was the last night that they were going to be there. So May 30th rolls around, and that's the morning of their flight. When Natalee doesn't return to the Holiday Inn hotel, no one really worries too much because it's like, well, like I said before, they were doing a lot of nonsense. There was room switching, there was partying every night, they were drunk, hungover, etc. So if Natalee didn't show up, you know, it's kind of like, all right, well, she'll make it to the flight at least. And they're doing roll call, one of the chaperones, and when they notice that Natalee is missing, they go ahead and look for her. They can't find her. And ultimately, she misses her return flight. So they look in her room. Her packed bags and passport are all found in her room, which means that she never made it back to her hotel, or at least never started packing to leave. So the assumption is she never made it back to that hotel on May 30th. Then, a little after 11 a.m., Natalee's mom, Beth, gets a call. It's Jody Bierman, which is one of the 7 adults who were chaperoning. And I've been saying chaperoning, but I want to use this term very loosely. They weren't chaperoning, necessarily supervising all of the whereabouts of the students. It was kind of more of like, well, they weren't even students anymore, graduates. It was more of a check-in, check-out, you know, like be where you gotta be when you gotta be there, but it wasn't really like they were supervising. I mean, everyone was 18 pretty much, and well, they were 18 and they were graduates and they were just having fun. So definitely there was a lot of loose chaperoning. So when Jody Bierman calls Natalee's mom, Beth, she tells her Natalee had not appeared in the hotel inn lobby for a roll call. She didn't return for her return flight to Alabama, and that no one had seen her since the night before. According to an article in Vanity Fair, Beth Twitty knew immediately that her daughter had been kidnapped in Aruba because she says that Natalee has never been late for anything in her life. And that's that mother intuition, like immediately you know something's wrong. Immediately when she heard this, she was like, there's something wrong, I have to get over there. And just like that, by 5 o'clock, Beth and Jug were on board a private jet and they were in Aruba. A long night's search ensues, and this brings them face to face with the Dutch teenager that they would firmly believe was responsible for the disappearance of their daughter to this day. When the Aruban police came to arrest Joran, he starts by acting like he has no idea who Natalee is, doesn't recognize the name, never heard it before, but then his story emerges with the events of the night. According to him, he left with Natalee and the Kalpoe brothers in Deepak's car after the bar closes, which this is corroborated. Her friend was the last one to see them with Natalee. According to van der Sloot, they go to the beach because Natalee really wants to see sharks. And they later drop her off at the hotel. And according to van der Sloot, he sees 2 men wearing black, similar to what security guards would be wearing, come up to her as they drop her off, but they drive away, so they don't know what happens afterwards. And he never saw her again. The family go to the hotel, and luckily they were able to recover some footage of that night. When they go through the footage, There was no record of Natalee on any of the tapes for the morning of May 30th, the night of May 29th, or Joran pulling up, or the car that the Kalpoe brothers were driving. Nothing shows up on these tapes at all. And so when the police follow the lead to the security guards, they clear them because there's no truth to the story. And so this is when Joran's story changes for the first time. So when they ask him again, Joran says that Natalee and him went to the beach alone, okay, because she wanted to see the sharks. So the sharks are still consistent. And they start to fool around, but she's very, very drunk, and she just passes out. And when this happened, he decides to leave. Just leave her on the beach, and he goes with the Kalpoe brothers in their car, and he never sees her again, leaving her on the beach alone. Okay. Now, the reason why I am making these faces is because his story changes so many times, and I'm not going to waste your time by telling you every single one of these lies. He goes so far into kind of just like trying to take down her character. You can find an account somewhere that says he gives up to like 25 different stories about this night. But the important thing to get out of this is that he's clearly a pathological liar for as many times as he's been changing the story for this one night. And his mother has even made comments about this from adolescence. He's been a liar, a manipulator, etc. What really makes this case complex, I feel like, is the handling of the case by the Aruban police officials. The relationship Beth has with the American press could have had a big hand in this whole thing. So when it comes to the way that Beth was treated with the Aruban police officials, they always said that she was very nice and accommodating until she would go to American press and say that the Aruban police officials weren't doing enough, or they weren't doing anything. And then this kind of turns into a whole press, I don't even know how to call it, like a circus show, basically. The Aruban police officials are upset by the way that she's painting them out in the American press. The American press are eating up the sensationalist nature of this case, and it really just gets mishandled. And then Joran is telling millions of stories, and he falls into prey, darkest, seediest, most salacious areas of the press, and gives them these information that they want because it's salacious news, but not that there's any truth to it. As we continue, though, there's no physical evidence because they never find a body for Natalee. They never find anything that can conclusively link Joran to her. However, Joran has made comments that he knows what happened to her, or he knows where she is, or he sold her to Venezuelan people who like to take humans and make them slaves. The Aruban police had reached a breaking point. Gerald Dompig had said that the biggest obstacle in solving this case was the Twitty family itself. So Beth Holloway, she does divorce, but at the time she was Beth Twitty, so they will call them the Twitty family, or say the Twitties. And so Gerald Dompig says that the biggest challenge of this case, not that there's no body, not that the lead suspects are lying all the time, not that the stories are constantly changing and they can't find evidence to officially pin the man who did this. The biggest issue to him was the Twitty family. And he goes in to say that he feels like the pressure from the family sidetracked the investigation. There was premature arrest of the main suspects that he feels like destroyed any chance that they had to actually gather evidence to solve the case. They were upset when there was questions being asked towards the family because they felt like, why aren't you asking these questions to the people who did it, not us? We have nothing to do with this. These people are clearly the ones who did it. And so that apparently was very off-putting to the Aruban police. They didn't understand the way that things were done in the Aruban system, and so there were certain things that the Aruban officials had to do that they didn't understand, and that they would think Aruban police was just kind of like twiddling their thumbs. And so there was a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding there as well. And even through all of this, Aruba suffered tremendously because the Twitties, along with the governor of Alabama, Bob Riley, who supported it at the time, they did a boycott, American tourists boycott the island of Aruba because of this case. And so Aruba also suffered like tremendously, just economically, socially, from the stigma that came with the Natalee Holloway disappearance case. This case is still unsolved to this day. Vandersloot later pleads guilty in 2010 of killing a woman in Peru, which happened 5 years to the day that Natalee disappeared. On January 12, 2012, a second hearing was held where Judge King signed the order declaring Natalee Holloway to be dead. So she is declared dead, although there was never a body recovered, and her case is technically still unsolved to this day. There is no one who has been held accountable for her death or for her disappearance. And we still don't know if it's a disappearance or a death either. Now, what I do want to go into is a few theories. So one of the theories that goes along with Joran's second story that he told is that he left Natalee alone on the beach that night after they went to see the sharks. So around the same time, 9 days prior exactly, there was a woman named Tracy Allen who was assaulted at the very same beach near a fisherman's shack that was near where Joran claims to have dropped off Natalee. So the story for Tracy is that she was walking past the fisherman's shack on May 20th, 2005, when a nude man pulls up his vehicle, jumps out, blocks her path to the hotel, and tries to kidnap and sexually assault her. Luckily, she gets away. And when they made a composite sketch, she was able to identify the predator in a lineup. This man was arrested, and because of a prior conviction that he had that was currently being appealed, he had been arrested earlier on an immigration charge, and at the time that this happened, he was out on bond. So then the miscommunication happened with the Justice Department where they actually let him go and he was released because of the prior case that had been appealed, but he was actually in jail at the time for this attempted sexual assault, but they let him go because of an appeal of a prior charge. But by the time that the police figured out their mistake, he was gone. He was just gone. They don't know where he went. He fled the country and he's never been seen since. So a lot of people have that idea as well, thinking that, well, because this happened in the same place, it's not a far stretch to think that this man who was out would have done something very similar. And then there's a weird one that, like, I don't even know how I feel about this theory, but basically somewhere in the case there's this guy named DJ Diablo who shows up, and he claims that he saw Natalee being dropped off by Joran at the hotel that night, and he says that he was at Carlos and Charlie's when they were there. It's a lot. So he claims that he was at Carlos and Charlie's that night and he saw them drop off Natalee at the hotel. I'm not sure how he would have seen that, but okay. He says that he was picked up by his friend around 11:30 on May 29th, and then he went to a club called Choose a Name. And then he says that he doesn't recall ever being at Carlos and Charlie's. He says, no, definitely it was Choose a Name. But everyone's like, no, but this whole thing happened at Carlos and Charlie's. And he's like, no, you guys have it wrong. This happened at Choose a Name. So, like, honestly, I mean, why would an innocent man come forward and say and claim that he saw something that he didn't, or claim that he knows more about a situation than he does? But honestly, there are so many crazy things that people do that I wouldn't be surprised. But his entire alibi and his entire story just contradicts everything that's, like, has firm evidence. Another theory is that Joran's father, who was training to be a judge at the time, could have somehow covered up, possibly like an OD went wrong. There are some people who don't believe that he murdered her. They do think that maybe with all of the stuff that she was kind of partaking in that night, possibly there could have been a mix with another drug, and then there could have been an OD, and possibly his father was somehow involved in covering that up for Joran. But that, I mean, there's no real substantial, like, evidence for that. But that is another theory that they have. And then the last theory is that the Aruban police themselves were just covering up a shoddy investigation, which would be so sad because apparently, and one of the biggest reasons why they feel this way is because they say that there's hotel records that show Natalee's room key being used several times between like 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. So if you remember back to the beginning when I was setting up the timeline, we know that everything like happened after the bar closes, and like that's where she vanishes and no one knows what happens to her. So with the timeline, it says the bar closes around 1:30 to 2 a.m. Either way though, they never say that it goes past like 3 or 4 a.m. But the hotel room key has records of being used between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And the Aruban police never question any of the other roommates and ask them what happened. Like, did someone use Natalee's key that night? Or because there was a lot of room switching, so it is possible. But the fact that they never interviewed anyone, any of the roommates, or asked anyone of what happened that night is a bit shady, you know? So there is that thought as well, that maybe they're just covering up a shoddy investigation. They don't want to kind of show all of the ways that they could have done better, or all of the ways that they possibly messed up and never brought closure to this girl's family. So really the story just means a lot to me, because it could happen to any of us if we go on vacation in a foreign country. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this story. I have more stories coming pretty much every single Wednesday, but I also do other videos that I'm gonna like intermix in there and whatnot. I hope you like my shirt. It's a Crime Junkies podcast merch. Like, Crime Junkie podcast is my favorite podcast, and this was their merch, and I for the very first time bought merch from them. They do like merch drops very, very randomly, and I never get them, but I did this time, and I love this sweater so much. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on the theories for this case, if you have your own theories that I didn't even mention, go ahead and put that in the comments below. I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for watching.